Hey, what's up guys, it's Bronson. In today's video we're going to be tattooing a Poseidon statue in the style of black and grey realism. And throughout the video I'm going to be sharing my thought process and some pro tips along the way. So let's get into it. So to start off this tattoo, I'm using a light to mid-tone and a 13 round mag. In this portion of the tattoo we have a wave below the Poseidon portrait and kind of washing over that. So in these early stages of the mapping process and getting some shapes and direction blocked in, I'm really focusing on the direction that these values are going in. You can see that my mag is always in the direction of the wave and it's whipping out in that same direction also here, kind of chopping in that direction of the wave. If I want that edge to be a little bit softer, whipping it more or blocking it in a bit more, then I'll just be a little bit heavier behind the mag. But in this blocking stage I'm really not too focused on the value, so I'd still like to leave a little bit of room in the skin to make something a little bit darker. So this is one of my lighter values in this area, so I don't have to think about committing to a value too much, and I can really focus on just getting ink into the skin, focusing on the direction and the shapes of all my blocks and values, and just moving in these stages. You can see now I'm adding a darker value as the next step in this area, and also after I've found that understanding and that respect for the shapes and direction that's going on with this form of the wave. And as I'm getting lower and closer to the edge of this tattoo, my hand movement is getting looser, creating more of a blurred block of this value. Down the bottom of the tattoo, I'm more focused on creating something that's drawing attention to the wave. So when I'm a few centimeters below the wave, I just want to create a bit of darkness, and having this looser blocks and larger areas of detail is a really easy excuse to create a dark to light gradient, because these dark tones down here, if I can make them even slightly darker than the reference image, it's going to make the light area of the wave just pop that much more. And on the edge of the tattoos, like this is the bottom of his leg, I do want to create that dark point to build our contrast that's anchoring this whole tattoo. So you can see here, still just using my mag to create these dark blocks and pockets in the wave. Working up in my values from the mid to lights and finalizing with my darker tones before I can get to these passes with my extra lights and lights to really saturate over areas. But once I have my darks in and I can trust those values, then I can work on saturating the area, eliminating some of these highlights and white areas that just aren't in the reference. And now that I'm finishing this transition area of the kind of dark pocket in the wave up into the whitewash where it's like splashing a bit more, I'm jumping ahead with the mag and just helping that transition along, creating my smooth values, and then I'm not going to overdo my sharp if I do that last. So for all of my sharp stuff in this tattoo, my liner and my round shader work, I am using the masked racer. I just think it's hitting a little bit better for these needle groupings and getting things in a little bit faster, creating some nicer textures than the Inkjector. And this is a 5 round shader, so I'm really just using this to add a little bit more sharpness to lift the whitewash and the splashes of this wave off of the portrait and giving the bottom of this tattoo as much dimension and life and interest as I can to the viewer. And even when I'm using my liners or my round shader, I'm still working in a similar process value wise. So I'm starting off with my light or mid-tones, then my definite darks, and then I'm doing almost like a saturation pass or my extra light tones with that value. And you can see how I'm using my liner in these situations. So this is a 7 round liner, but I'm really just scratching it, creating more of a texture and a little bit of layers in this wave. And now there's this part where another section of wave kind of blends onto the portrait. So I thought that my liner and my round shader is going to get the shape and direction sharply put in the portrait, and the sharpness is going to help this effect last. I think if I mag and chop this across, it might just look a little bit too white and whiskery, but getting this liner in is really helping to show that that direction is really prominent, helping the viewer know what's what. So showing that that's a part of the wave, because with this beard that we're about to do, I'm only using my mags. So it's automatically going to separate and create a contrast just in that texture and sharpness alone. And now we're on to the statue's beard. This is an area that I think these round mags really shine and help to speed up. As long as you're really focusing on the direction that these gradients and strokes of the beard are going in, you can really just turn your mag in that direction and start like a heavy saturating or packing pass through it. To me it does seem like quite a boring thing to be showing on video, but I don't want to skip any part of this process and creating this tattoo. Really do focus on what I'm doing with my mag at all times. I think if there's anything that you can learn from me, and I'm confident in teaching and saying I have experience and can create good products with, it would be my mag use. So if you are watching these videos, then do try and pay attention to the direction and even the diversity of the techniques that I'm using with this same needle. I can go from packing an area to smoothly brushing like I am here, and then go on to block in values and even line with it. And having confidence in your needle grouping, so whether it's your mags or your liners, the more control you get, the more choices it opens up for you to apply into your own tattooing to achieve a certain look and just achieve a better looking finished product. So I'll just make sure that there are some real-time passes and tattooing to give you guys a little bit of insight, and hopefully you guys can pick something up from a little bit of this footage that you can apply into your own tattooing. So really just focusing on the direction and the hand speed that I've got when I'm trying to achieve some of these areas. A little bit of a slower hand speed if I want that edge to be a little bit sharper. And then you can see really just slowly letting the tattoo machine do the work and focusing on the direction and just letting the machine build up these values and slowly saturating the skin more and more. I'm not trying to get in and just pack this value in, because there is a gradient. It's like light to dark, a sharp edge, a soft edge, so I can't rush that. And then here's more of a saturating pass with this lighter value, working out of the shadow and mapping in some of this far side of the beard. So you can see, yeah, these tones are just starting to achieve a little bit of direction, getting that saturation up and finding some of these shapes, really like sculpting it out. That's what I feel like this mag work is like, where you're slowly building up this saturation and the value and the sharpness. You know, every pass is slowly just stacking the opacity up, the saturation up. If you use the mag on a different angle, you can create this sharpness. But also every artist is different, so don't think that everything that I'm doing is going to work for you. You know, we all have a different way of viewing a reference. We're all wanting to create a slightly different piece of art, so you have to take a little bit of this knowledge and see what's working for you, you know, or perhaps trying to do my style is going to create your own style with your hand speed, behind my techniques or something like that. Or if you just prefer different needle groupings, experiment with things. I don't want anyone to kind of get obsessed with my process and think that what I'm doing is the only way or the right way of doing it, because that's definitely not true. Make sure that you are, especially if you're in your early stages of tattooing, trying a lot of different needles. If you think something's nice, then try jumping up or down in that same needle configuration that you like. So if you like a 13 round mag, then try a 15. It's going to tattoo a lot differently, perhaps a lot smoother, and you just don't want to miss out on all that tattooing has to offer. It's like being a painter and only using 2 brushes. You want to try all of these things just to see if it is something that you can use, or you might only need to use it twice a year, but at least you have the knowledge to be able to turn to that needle to create this technique easily for you. Things like a 7 mag or a 7 flat, they can create some really unique textures and get into some really small portraits as well. But just getting back to the piece, so I'm starting to move on to the portrait, past the beard, mapping in the lips and this transition area where the beard is starting to end. And these stop-start areas where the beard's joining onto the face, I think it's really important areas, and it's good not to go too dark too soon. So I really like to start off with these slightly lighter values, just to be that undertone. It's almost applying that like airbrush look. If I have something that's lighter and being the final whip of that direction and then applying a darker tone over that, I think that transition is just much smoother, and it stops any temptation to overuse a dark tone. If I've got black in my cartridge, it's very simple just to whip that out, but I find getting in this almost undertone and body to the direction, then I'm much more accurately using my black and my darker values. So here I'll just demonstrate with some more real-time clips. I'm really just mapping in with my light and my mid-tones, making sure that my direction is right, leaving a really good foundation to apply my black tone. And I'm not deliberately passing over areas that I'm going to black out. I'll just leave them blank. But if there is a transition area, then I will try and lay some sort of undertone there. So you can see, just continuing to map with this mid-tone. And this is in a really dark area, so it's safe to use this tone as well. Working on a little bit of my sharpness. Starting to map a little bit above where I'm going to finalize, just to save my stencil and stuff as well. Just nicely focusing on the direction here, especially as this beard joins onto the portrait as well. Such an important area. Mapping in the nose. And just trying to overwork that mid-tone too before I get into these blacks here. So now that I've got this mid-tone down, it's so easy to use this black. It's like the last puzzle piece, So I know where I want it to stop and start, and to be soft or sharp, because I've done so much work with this mid-tone. It's now similar to using a white, where all tattoo you've left these small pockets perfectly for that value to sit in. And that's a great thing about overworking one of your stages. So doing a lot of light and mid-tone work allows you to really have fun and focus on doing a great job with your black value. So really trying to make sure that you're packing things properly now that that pressure's off on placement and direction, because you've overdone that light or mid-tone step. So this dark and your blacks can be perfect, and it's such an important value in tattooing. So just there, those directional kind of flicks. And here, it's kind of like a slow pack, but I am whipping it out on that high side and being heavy on the lower side to really achieve that nice solidly packed black, but also soft enough where the beard kind of goes into the shadow softly rather than a hard lined edge. So now we just finished packing this area, making sure that my blacks are really solid before we start more definitely mapping in the nose. We had already passed through this area with our light tones, so we've done some of the work, but now we just really need to make sure that the shape and all the blocks of these values is correct. And I think the value choice for kind of going into these stages is really good as well. You can see here it's just like the mid-tone, even though there might be some little hits of black in the shadow, it's not going to be overused in this piece. I think it was 6 months or so ago where I really decided that that's where I wanted to put in so much more thought and effort into my tattooing, was my use of my values and the values that I was creating. I wanted it to just be so much more accurate. So I think I've really achieved that and stepped up in that area. And even here, you're about to see me kind of pass over all the work that we've done with this black. So everything so far has been like my lights, my mids, my extra darks, and maybe a little bit of black, but I'm really getting in that final hits now in the beard. Whereas before, I think I would have jumped there sooner, thinking that once my blacks are in, I'm a step ahead in the process. But now I'm really just wanting to achieve such an accurate look and really the best work that I can. And again, even here is an area that I talked about laying a base value, giving the area a direction and something to whip out of, but now I'm applying kind of a mid-tone to that. In this process, it has slowed me down a bit more too, but I am really happy with the work that it's producing, and I feel like this might be one of my best pieces on YouTube as well. I was like struggling a little bit, just being like, I don't have my best work. Like, you always want to showcase your best stuff. It's quite easy to take a photo of a great tattoo and put it up on Instagram and then job's done. But here there's a lot more pressure, so it's good to have a piece that is kind of representing kind of like my current ability, I suppose. But that statement's definitely not going to age well for me. I think I get better every week or two, and then I'm like, man, I wish I could do that piece again. I feel like I could do it so much better. So I guess we'll just keep trying to achieve that, putting up cool tattoos for you guys here and explaining the process, and hopefully we're all kind of learning together as well in this process. But yeah, I'm super grateful for all of your guys' support as well throughout this channel. Like, I'm enjoying it a lot more than I thought. And it's great seeing our community grow and even what we've achieved so far, really. But yeah, back to the tattoos. Just kind of mapping in this cheek, and I am working on the top of the shadow here. So just mapping it in with this lighter tone before I start getting in my darker tones and things that are a bit more definite. I'm really like triple checking my reference as I'm doing this and seeing the direction of which way even the skin's moving in. So every time my mag is in the skin, its direction is intentional. I'm really focusing on and wanting to do a good job of this transition where the beard is meeting the face. So I'm slowly saturating, and here I'm just dropped to an even lighter value, and then I want to saturate it more. So a lighter value but really packing it in a bit more. It's achieving a little bit of a glow with this value. So you're saturating but you're not dulling the piece. That's where these whitewash / like opaque wash tones are really good. You can heavily saturate, you're still bringing life into the piece. You're not creating these dull shadows or saturation, or your shadows aren't getting confused with simple facial features or dimension in the face. So you can see my next kind of value in this puzzle piece is slightly darker, and then just accurately using that, brushing it onto that kind of light and extra light tone, making this transition flawless. And then here you can see the care that I'm taking and just making sure that the direction, that this shadow and that this form is just perfect. And I really don't want to create a simple lazy looking shadow here, kind of like a triangle that has a dark to light gradient. And there is also part of my wave merging onto the right side of the shadow, so just softly mag mapping that into. And starting to finalize the shapes of the nose and saturate some light passes through as well, leaving room for my highlight and making sure not to oversaturate too, or to cut into my negative space with my light tones as well. So now that we're starting the eye, I've picked a value that I'm comfortable to work with mapping out this area with my mag. And you can see the stencil isn't in the best condition, but there is more than enough information needed to complete this area flawlessly. And just like my process through the rest of this tattoo so far, I'm starting off with a comfortable value, something a little bit lighter, and then I'm working my way into my darker tones and towards my black, and leaving that final pass of a really light value till last to really complete the saturation in an area once I have all my shapes nicely blocked in. So you can see here I am working in a darker tone than where I started this area. So this is like the second stage of mapping this area in. And not focusing on my sharpness too much yet. Just really focusing on blocking in these shadows and creating these forms. So starting to lightly get in some of these blacks. I'm not using a heavily packing technique yet, more just contaminating some of the tones I've left behind and slowly sculpting up the level of that black. So I really like to just slowly build up tones. It's really hard to see with a fresh tattoo, but on the healed result you see a much deeper black, and also your other values, since you've packed them in there a bit more, there's so much more depth and life in all of these tones. There's not too much empty skin or patchiness in any of these areas. So again, just really focusing on what I'm doing with my mag, lightly brushing over this area, but always heavily focus on the direction, the sharpness and the texture that I'm trying to create here. Really thinking about all these forms in a three-dimensional way will give you a huge advantage over other artists that are just staring at their reference. So now I'm at more of a saturation stage, making sure that everything is saturated how I want it and looking at the correct value. So even with the same tone, really packing it in a bit more on that right side, giving that same value a lot more depth. And just brushing out the sharpness of the shape that I want to make, making this kind of skin wrinkle a little bit softer on the edge of it, and then I can bring in a darker tone to start it, where that wrinkle is a little bit harsher and I can get a deeper shadow in there. And here's a little bit of real-time footage of just creating some sharper cuts in the skin, both below the eye, and then starting off this statue styled eyebrow. And with this statue style, I'm no longer wanting to create a look that's focusing on the individual hairs. I'm more wanting to block in forms that are all shaped in the right direction. Saturating some more of the shadow in, and then really packing in these blacks. Now that I've finalized my forms, I know exactly where they need to sit. And one observation is that I'm never completing everything, finalizing it as I'm working up. I'll hit perhaps one stage for one height of a section, and then when I get to a feature, I'll start mapping it and then work slightly above it, building off of that so I can really see a little bit of the values that are surrounding an area, whether it's an eye or the mouth, and then I really know the appropriate tones put into all of the forms now that I have a little bit extra surrounding the area, making finalizing that area so much easier. Here I've got the masked racer back out, using the 5 round shader to get in some of these waves that are splashing up towards the portrait, creating some depth in the areas and just picking spots that I want to be sharper than others, and slowly working up my values the same as I am with my mags. Getting into my darker areas down here, kind of finalizing this area with those dark tones, and then starting to saturate more of this here, and slowly getting ready to move up towards this crown. Mapping that in with my mag, just a soft shadow for now. I will make another pass soon with my darker tones to really finalize where I want that shadow to start. And also these wrinkles of the forehead, just starting them off with a really light value and also just light saturation for now. Then I can build all of these layers up, starting off the direction of the hair. Since all of the stencil is all sitting so close together, I like to just bite the bullet and use that one value across all of these areas and just lightly use it to finalize these areas a little bit stencil wise. Then there's no more pressure once I've taken a few minutes to map all of this in. And just leaving this here fairly open on the right side so that when we continue to finish this leg, we still have a lot of space that we can work with flowing aspects into one another, so that even if it takes 10 unplanned sessions with each tattoo just being its individual piece, I'm always able to link all of these tattoos up so that it appears to be one large tattoo when the leg is complete. And just a little preview of the tattoo, so giving it a bit of a wipe. Really happy with where it's at now. And here's a really good display of building up these wrinkle areas of the forehead. You want to saturate it enough so that the area looks complete, but also not going too dark in your values, especially straight away. Just build up these light tones, and I think you'll find the area will look more complete from a highly saturated lighter value rather than trying to rush it with a mid or a dark tone. And here you can see the actual amount of black that I'm using in this forehead and below the crown area. It's really not much at all. I've done a lot of work with my other tones, just allowing these really accurate hits. And I can choose to saturate that heavily at the start of my shadow, creating a really deep and effective look. Not just a single tone shadow where I'm just using black. And now starting this crown, just again mapping with my mid-tone. I really wanted this to kind of look quite different and unique to a Poseidon crown, rather than being some kind of normal crown that's just placed on the statue-like figure. I wanted to give some kind of coral-like texture and just make it look like it was made out of something relative to this whole tattoo. So you can see the motions that I'm doing is, in my head I was really focusing on kind of like a bio-organical kind of shape and texture, creating some ribs in all of these channels and highlights. And here, just starting on my background, giving it a nice soft outline and sharper in some areas. Once I have a background tone behind this, I can really start thinking about the values that I want in here and how much negative space I want to leave. You can see, even in comparison to my reference to the left, I have saturated it more, especially in the lower portion, because I didn't want to highlight sitting so close to the face, and that negative space really takes attention away from the portrait. So I wanted my majority of my negative space to all be sitting in the portrait, and this to be quite a heavily saturated and textured area. A lot of the negative space that I am leaving is really just the gap where I want the white to sit and create its own texture with the white. And after a bit of time with the mag, I can go in with my round shader and create a few sharper sections of detail, finalizing the look of that coral kind of gritty texture. Now it's been a pretty rough day for my client, a lot of really saturated work on his legs and not the nicest area to get tattooed, so I've put some Bactine on his skin and given that about 5 minutes to soak in. I'll leave the top half to continue to soak, so it's a little bit gentler for these white highlights for him. Bactina is a pretty great product. It just has a low percentage of lidocaine, and you can apply it when the skin is broken. So I like to use it more than kind of a numbing product where I have to start my day waiting for it. It's pretty good just when your client is just really had enough, and for these white highlights it really just takes the sting out for him. Alright, so now we're into my white highlights, and at the moment I haven't been doing much white with my mags. I've just been leaving it all to these sharp, really direct and accurate hits with a liner or a round shader. So at the moment, since this is a slightly larger area with these waves and these channels are fairly big, I'm using a 5 round shader. And you can see here on the lip just these really direct and accurate hits. I kind of feel like a little bit less is more, and a little bit of interest rather than just a dot and a line. I just want to create these unique shapes where there's just something a little bit more in there for the viewer. And a dot or a line of white sitting down the nose, it almost just goes against all of the realism that you've put into this piece. You're making that angle just look like it's dead straight and really boring. So having a little bit of variation in your movement and some randomness with your white highlights, I feel like really tops off the realism. And you can see here with the eye, creating a really harsh highlight under that eyelid shadow, and where the eye is fairly center and furthest forward to the viewer. And some sharper hits of detail on this bottom eyelid. And then a few hits on the eyebrow as well, because I don't want that white to just stop at the eye level. I need it to carry through and naturally fade out through the piece, especially because I'm wanting quite a bit hit into this crown to really make it a dramatic piece in this tattoo. And you can see my actions with this needle. It's quite a slow hand speed, it's quite heavy, there's a little bit of weight behind the needle, and I'm really focusing on a tight movement to get this white packed in really sharp and bold. And with our white highlights finished and the tattoo is complete, it's time to have a look at our final result. Thank you guys for making it to the end of the video. I hope that you all enjoyed it and that there was something helpful there that you can apply into your own tattooing. Make sure that you drop a like on the video and that you are subscribed to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video.